Greetings and salutations, fellow pilots. In this video, I will be featuring the premium American fighter, the Bell P-39N-1 Airacobra. An excellent little aircraft. It features two 12.7mm machine guns, which do 45 damage each, but have a very high rate of fire of 750 rounds per minute. They have an effective firing range of 520 meters, which would be I would say a medium effective firing range. The P-39N-1 also has four 7.62mm machine guns, which each do 23 damage, with a rate of fire of 600 rounds per minute, so still a high rate of fire. A slightly shorter effective firing range of 440 meters, which is not too good, honestly. It's even, it's a bit of a struggle with 520 meters. The 440 meters is, pretty abysmal. However, it does also have a 37mm cannon, which does 170 damage per second, has a rate of fire of 120 rounds per minute, and a medium effective firing range of 520 meters, which is not atypical for this tier 6. This aircraft is indicated as having good airspeed and boost. I think that describing the aircraft as having a good boost is an exaggeration. It only has a 6-second engine boost, so about equivalent to what your typical Japanese fighter would have. I really don't see that as being a good boost. It's an adequate boost. It's better than not having one, or better than some aircraft that have 4-second boosts, but wouldn't describe it as particularly good. But the airspeed is fairly decent, and to accentuate that particular strength, I have chosen to equip as upgrades Aircraft Polish 2, which increases the top speed of the P-39N-1 by 5%. I have also equipped Engine Tuning 2, which increases engine power by 5%. An increase in engine power assists us in maintaining speed during turns while climbing. It also assists us in perhaps exceeding our optimum altitude. I have found that is of help in that regard. Now, to improve what is already high maneuverability in horizontal turns, I have equipped Lightweight Airframe 2, which increases by 3% maneuverability in all axes. Now, in the past, I would have also equipped Control Surface Adjustment 2, which increases maneuverability in turns by 3%. But this aircraft already has high maneuverability in horizontal turns, so it would seem to me that would be an upgrade offering diminished returns. Now, because this aircraft does have high maneuverability already, you might consider, instead of equipping Lightweight Airframe 2, equipping Improved Covering, which decreases by 20% the chance of critical damage to wings and tail, and also increases the aircraft's hit points by 5%. So that is I think a very strong option, maybe even advisable for this aircraft. I just happen to be equipping at this moment lightweight airframe 2. The thought behind not equipping lightweight airframe 2 and instead equipping improved covering is that, again, you may be getting diminished returns because the aircraft already has high maneuverability in horizontal turns. Of course, having high maneuverability in horizontal turns does not equate to having high maneuverability in all axes, which is what lightweight airframe 2 accomplishes in terms of a 3% increase. The aircraft does have low survivability though, and so equipping improved covering can help to ameliorate that weakness. So, either way, it's kind of a judgment call. I don't think either option is wrong. There's certainly justifications either way. Now, in terms of pilot skills, I have equipped Engine Guru 1 and Engine Guru 2, which collectively increase engine thrust and top speed by 5%. Again, I find that these skills assist this aircraft in a number of ways, including maintaining speed and turns, better climbing, but also being able to get higher in altitude than perhaps the aircraft is positioned for normally without those upgrades. I've also equipped Aerodynamics Expert, and the reason I have equipped that is that it increases the effects of our engine tuning. It also increases the effects of aircraft polish as well as lightweight airframe. So there's good synergy with Aerodynamics Expert and all 3 of our chosen upgrades. If you went with improved covering though, that particular upgrade would not be enhanced by Aerodynamics Expert. You would need to get Protection Expert to accentuate that upgrade, but then you would not be accentuating 2 of the upgrades. So I think the better choice would be to go with Aerodynamics Expert. Looking at ammunition, I have gone across the board with universal ammunition. So with the machine guns, with both of the machine guns, you'll see that the chance of fire is high and the chance of critical damage is perhaps medium to low. And that is in keeping with the low damage output of machine guns, but the high rate of fire. With that high rate of fire, you have a very good chance of setting fires on the enemy aircraft. On the other hand, with the cannon, as you can see, the universal ammunition has a high chance of critical damage, but a middle to low chance of fire. And that, of course, is consistent with the large damage output that the cannon on this aircraft can produce. For consumables, I have chosen to go with all gold consumables, and the effect of that is that we have a 60-second cooldown on each of these, and they each activate automatically, so you don't have to think about it. You can concentrate on other important things like flying your aircraft, maneuvering, having situational awareness, and putting rounds on enemy targets. If you were to go with the non-gold version of these consumables, the two differences would be that instead of a 60-second cooldown, you would have a 90-second cooldown, and instead of these consumables activating automatically, you would need to activate them manually. So certainly they're all still good consumables if you don't go with the gold. I just prefer the gold because mainly of the automatic activation of those abilities. This aircraft is indicated as having low survivability. Its lifeblood is its speed as well as its maneuverability. And to protect those two strengths, I have chosen to go with Control Surface Auto Trim, which automatically restores controllability of wings and tail. You can't be fast, you can't maneuver well if your wings and tail have been damaged, so I think it's very important to have Control Surface Auto Trim equipped to deal with that eventuality. Also, of course, you can't have high speed or maneuverability if your engine's been knocked out. So again, protecting the lifeblood of this aircraft, its maneuverability and speed, I chose to equip automatic engine restarter so that if we do lose an engine, we can get it back quickly. And of course, fire is always a danger with a squishy fighter like this, and so I chose to go with automatic fire extinguisher. Now, in many fighters, I would have chosen heavy-duty control surfaces, which increases aircraft maneuverability in all axes for 10 seconds. And of course, that's used manually because it's very situational. And I don't think it would be a mistake to go with that skill, maybe in place of fire extinguisher. But because this aircraft again already has high maneuverability, I think that it is a better use of the limited consumables we have to go with survivability related issues. In terms of the aircraft specifications, optimum altitude is 1500 meters, so it is very much a medium altitude performer. Certainly with the upgrades that we have included, as well as our chosen pilot skills, you can get higher than that 1500 and maybe even be somewhat effective. It's certainly not going to make this aircraft a high altitude performer, but it definitely improves the altitude performance. Stall speed is 180 kilometers per hour, which is a bit high. This aircraft does tend to stall easily. Optimum airspeed is 380 kilometers per hour. Top speed at best altitude is 600 kilometers per hour, which is quite good. Maximum dive speed is 740 kilometers per hour. And you see the high maneuverability that this aircraft has, with an average time to turn 360 degrees, 9 seconds. Now your Spitfires, your Japanese fighters, your nimble Japanese fighters are at 8 seconds if I recall correctly. So again, a very maneuverable aircraft. Looking at paint schemes, this is desert that is currently in view, marine, winter, and summer. Okay, so what we are going to do now is head over to World of Warplanes website and compare the Airacobra to other Tier 6 fighters. Okay, so we are here on World of Warplanes website using their Compare Aircraft tool. I have gone into each one of these aircraft and fully customized them so that all upgrades have been selected at their highest levels. Also, if you were to attempt this yourself, I just want to point out that whatever your main aircraft that you're wanting to compare, you want to choose it last, which will put it on your list first. So first up, we have the North American Mustang 1A and the North American Mustang Mk1. These aircraft are both in service with the British line, and they are both premium aircraft. Looking first at gun armaments, we see that the Mustang 1A has equivalent armaments to the Airacobra, whereas the Mustang Mk1 is indicated as having an inferior armament layout to the Airacobra. So just looking first at the Mustang 1A, we see that it has 4 20mm cannons, and each one of those cannons does 90 damage per second with a medium rate of fire of 400 rounds per minute, but a very good effective firing range of 680 meters. Now bear in mind that there are 4 of these cannons. There is only 1 cannon on the Airacobra, which is the 37mm cannon. It does do a much higher damage than the singular cannons on the Mustang 1A. The Airacobra 37mm cannon does 170 damage per second. 2 of these cannons on the Mustang 1A would be almost equivalent to that. There are, of course, 4 cannons on the Mustang 1A, and basically what Wargaming has concluded is that those other 2 cannons are the equivalent of the 6 extra machine guns that are on the Airacobra. It's always, of course, difficult to quantify machine guns to cannons in terms of how collectively they might work, because you have to, of course, consider in that equation the fires that can be started by machine guns that tend not to be started by cannons as often. If we take a look at the Mustang Mk1, it has 8 machine guns, but it has no cannons, and that is why it is indicated as being inferior to the Airacobra. Looking at bombs and rockets, none of the aircraft we're going to look at in this comparison have bombs or rockets, so that's a non-factor. In terms of survivability, both the Mustangs have slightly higher survivability and hit points than the Airacobra. In terms of top speed at best altitude, all 3 of these aircraft are the same. Both Mustangs, though, do have a significant advantage in the dive by 110 kilometers per hour. Of course, where the Airacobra has a huge advantage is with regard to average time to turn 360 degrees. The Airacobra has a 2.1 second advantage over the Mustang 1A and a 1.8 second advantage over the Mustang Mk1. So clearly the Airacobra in any turning dogfight is going to win that battle as compared to a Mustang, all things being equal. Rate of roll, the Airacobra is again superior to both the Mustangs in maneuverability. Optimum airspeed, both Mustangs have slightly higher optimum airspeeds by 20 kilometers per hour. Stall speed is higher for the Airacobra, so the Airacobra will stall prior to either of the Mustangs. Not a huge difference in altitude among these aircraft. The Mustangs do have a 100-meter advantage, but that's really not that significant. The Airacobra does have a advantage in terms of rate of climb over the Mustangs, which is maybe a little bit surprising actually. Because if you think of a Mustang, you think of it being a higher altitude aircraft, you think of it as having, strong engines and good climbing capability, but Airacobra beats them out in that regard. Next up, we have the Supermarine Spitfire 5 and the Kawasaki Ki-88, which is a premium aircraft. In terms of gun armaments, the Airacobra is indicated as being superior to both of those aircraft. If we look at the Spitfire, we see that it has 4 machine guns versus the 6 machine guns that the Airacobra equip, and those machine guns do slightly more damage than the 7.62 millimeter machine guns on the Airacobra, but significantly less damage than the two 12.7 millimeter machine guns on the Airacobra. And of course, we have to then look at the issue of the respective cannons on these aircraft. The Spitfire has two 20 millimeter cannons that each do 90 damage per second, so a total of 180 damage per second as compared to the 170 damage per second of the single cannon on the Airacobra. So not a huge difference there, and the extra cannon certainly does not make up for the shortfall in machine guns. The cannon on the Spitfire does have a longer effective firing range, 680 meters versus the 520 millimeters on the Airacobra. So, in a straight-on dogfight, the Spitfire is going to get the first rounds off onto the Airacobra, which could be a significant factor in who prevails. Looking at the Ki-88, we see that it has one 37 millimeter cannon, which does 160 damage per second, which is 10 damage per second less than the 170 damage per second done by the 37 millimeter on the Airacobra. It also has two 20 millimeter cannons that do 65 damage per second each, but that will not make up for the difference in the respective 37 millimeter cannons or collectively the machine guns on the Airacobra. And that's why the Ki-88 is indicated as being inferior in the armaments category as compared to the Airacobra. Looking next at survivability, the Airacobra has a slight advantage in terms of hit points over the Spitfire, nothing of any significance that would really make a important difference. And likewise, the Ki-88 has a slight advantage over the Airacobra, but again, not very significant one. Basically, these aircraft are roughly equivalent in the survivability department. The top speed at best altitude, the Spitfire has a 40 km per hour advantage over the Airacobra, but the Ki-88 and the Airacobra are the same. Airacobra does have a slight advantage of 20 kilometers per hour on the maximum dive speed, but the Airacobra and the Ki-88 are equivalent in that category. In terms of maneuverability, the Spitfire is indicated as being slightly more maneuverable than the Airacobra, whereas the Ki-88 is indicated as being significantly less maneuverable than the Airacobra. And you can kind of see that play out in the average time to turn 360 degrees. The Spitfire has a 1 second advantage over the Airacobra, whereas the Airacobra has a 0.7 second advantage over the Ki-88. But all these aircraft are very maneuverable. In terms of rate of roll, the Airacobra has a significant advantage in that regard over both the Spitfire and the Ki-88. Optimum airspeed, the Spitfire is inferior in that respect as compared to the Airacobra, whereas the Ki-88 and the Airacobra are the same. Again here, you know, the Airacobra, just its stall speed is not very good, and so it will stall much faster than either the Spitfire or the Ki-88. Optimum altitude, slight advantage commanded by the Airacobra over the Spitfire of 100 meters. The Ki-88 has a 300 meter advantage over the Airacobra, which is not insignificant. Rate of climb for the Ki-88 and the Airacobra, though, are the same, whereas the Spitfire has a slight advantage in that category. Next up, we have the Kawasaki Ki-61 Hien and the Mitsubishi A6M50. In terms of gun armaments, the Airacobra is indicated as being significantly superior to both the Ki-61 and the A6M50. Just taking a look at that, the Ki-61 has two 20mm cannons and two 12.7mm machine guns. The machine guns do slightly less damage per second on the Ki-61 than they do on the Airacobra. The machine guns on the Ki-61 also have a lower rate of fire and a shorter effective firing range. So they're basically just inferior to the 12.7mm machine guns on the Airacobra. There are two 20mm cannons, but they do relatively low damage per second of only 65 as compared to the 170 damage per second of the 37mm cannon on the Airacobra. Looking at the Zero, we see it has two 13.2mm machine guns, which do only slightly more damage per second than the 12.7mm machine guns on the Airacobra. Zero also has two 20mm cannons, which do 94 damage per second each, so about 188 damage per second collectively speaking. And they do have a very good effective firing range, but overall, taking all the gun armaments of the Airacobra, the 6 machine guns, the 37mm cannon, the Zero is just outclassed by the Airacobra. In terms of hit points, the Airacobra has higher hit points than both the Ki-61 and the Zero. Not of any significant amount, however, so I would say these aircraft are roughly equivalent in terms of survivability. At top speed at best altitude, the Ki-61 and the Airacobra are equivalent, whereas the Zero suffers by 30 kilometers per hour as compared to the Airacobra. Same thing with maximum dive speed. The Airacobra has the advantage in that category. But not surprisingly, both the Japanese aircraft have a faster turning rate than does the Airacobra, the Ki-61 by 1 second, the Zero by 1.7 seconds. But, you know, Japanese fighters are, of course, renowned for their maneuverability, so not too surprising there. The Airacobra does have an advantage, though, over the Japanese aircraft in terms of its rate of roll. Optimum airspeed, again, Airacobra has the advantage in that regard, but as has been the case with other aircraft, the Airacobra will stall much sooner than either of the Japanese aircraft, and the Zero has an excellent stall speed of 90 kilometers per hour, which is, I believe, if I recall correctly, the same as the American Pancake Heavy Fighter, which is one of the best stall speeds in the game. The Ki-61 and the Airacobra have equivalent optimum altitudes, whereas the Zero is clearly a low altitude fighter, being only at 1,000 meters. Both of the Japanese aircraft, however, have an advantage in terms of rate of climb. Next up, we have the North American P-51A Mustang and the Supermarine Spitfire 5 DB605, which is the German premium Spitfire. In terms of gun armaments, the Airacobra has the advantage over both of those aircraft. Looking at that, take a look first at the P-51A Mustang, and we see that it has 4 12.7 millimeter machine guns versus the 6 total machine guns on the Airacobra. And those 12.7 millimeter machine guns on the 51A do only slightly better damage than the 12.7 millimeter machine guns on the Airacobra. They do, outclass the 7.62 millimeter machine guns on the Airacobra, both in terms of damage per second, having over twice the damage per second as compared to the 7.62 millimeters on the Airacobra. But they also have a effective firing range that is longer than the 7.62s on the Airacobra, as well as a higher rate of fire by 200 rounds per minute. However, what the 51A does not have is, of course, a 37 millimeter cannon. The Spitfire, basically the same, for the same reasons as the British Spitfire that we reviewed. It has 4 7.69 millimeter machine guns, which do much less damage per second than the 12.7 millimeters of the Airacobra, and approximately the same amount of damage per second as the 7.62 millimeter machine guns on the Airacobra. It has 2 20 millimeter cannons that do 90 damage per second each, so collectively 180 damage per second, which is not that superior to the single 37 millimeter cannon on the Airacobra. These 20 millimeter cannons, though, do have a much higher rate of fire than the 37 millimeter cannon on the Airacobra, and a better effective firing range. In terms of hit points, the P-51A does have a slight advantage over the Airacobra, whereas the Spitfire has a slight disadvantage as compared to the hit points on the Airacobra. None of that, however, is very significant, so these aircraft have roughly the same survivability. Top speed at best altitude, not surprisingly, the P-51A Mustang is faster by 70 kilometers per hour than the Airacobra, whereas the Spitfire is the same. The P-51A Mustang does have an advantage in terms of maximum dive speed by 110 kilometers per hour over the Airacobra, whereas the Spitfire is disadvantaged by 20 kilometers per hour on the dive. However, the Airacobra will be able to outturn the P-51A Mustang by 1.2 seconds, but the Spitfire has 1 second advantage over the Airacobra. Rate of roll for the P-51A and the Airacobra are the same, whereas the Spitfire has a 40 degree per second disadvantage. Optimum airspeed, P-51A Mustang slightly faster than the Airacobra by 71 kilometers per hour. The Spitfire slightly slower than the Airacobra by 57 kilometers per hour. Again, consistent with the other aircraft, the Airacobra will stall much sooner than either the P-51A Mustang or the Spitfire. Both the P-51A Mustang and the Spitfire have a significant advantage in terms of optimum altitude, 400 meters for the P-51A and 500 meters for the German Spitfire. However, the Airacobra has an advantage in terms of rate of climb. Next up, we have the Messerschmitt Bf-109F and the Yakovlev Yak-1M. The Airacobra is indicated as being significantly superior in terms of armaments as compared to both the Bf-109F and the Yak-1M. Looking into that more specifically, the Bf-109F has two 13mm machine guns, which do only slightly higher damage per second than the 12.7mm machine guns on the Airacobra. However, the 13mm machine guns on the Bf-109F have a lower rate of fire and a shorter effective firing range than the 12.7mm machine guns on the Airacobra. The Bf-109F does have two 20mm cannons. However, collectively, they only do slightly more damage per second, 180 damage per second, as compared to the 170 damage per second of the 37mm cannon on the Airacobra. In terms of the Yak-1M, it has one 20mm cannon, which does 110 damage per second, certainly inferior to the 170 damage per second of the 37mm on the Airacobra, and it only has two 12.7mm machine guns, which do only slightly better damage per second than the 12.7mm machine guns on the Airacobra. So clearly, in terms of armaments, the Yak-1M is inferior to the Airacobra. In terms of hit points, the Bf-109F has a very slight advantage over the Airacobra, whereas the Airacobra has a 30 hit points advantage over the Yak-1M. Top speed at best altitude, both the Bf-109F and the Yak-M are faster than the Airacobra. Maximum dive speed, the Bf-109F has an 80 km per hour advantage over the Airacobra, whereas the Airacobra has a 40 km per hour advantage over the Yak-1M. The Airacobra does have a 0.7 second advantage over the Bf-109F as far as average time to turn 360 degrees, whereas the Yak-1M has a 1.3 second advantage over the Airacobra. So, if you're in an Airacobra and you're seeing a Yak-1M, you definitely do not want to get into a close-in fight with that Yak-1M. You want to engage from distance, and if you see the Yak-1M getting closer, you want to get some distance. However, that might be difficult given that the Yak-1M has an advantage in terms of top speed at best altitude as compared to the Airacobra. So if you're trying to gain distance in the Airacobra from the Yak-1M, you may want to consider diving, because there is a 40 km per hour advantage in the dive for the Airacobra as compared to the Yak-1M. Rate of roll, same for the Airacobra and the Yak-1M. The Bf-109F has a slight disadvantage. Now, the optimum altitude for the Airacobra is superior to that of the Yak-1M, whereas the Bf-109F has a 50 km per hour advantage over the Airacobra. Stall speed, again, Airacobra suffering in that department and having the disadvantage as compared to the BF-109F and the Yak-1M. Optimum altitude, the BF-109F, not surprisingly, has a 500 meter advantage over the Airacobra. Of course, the German fighters are, always tend to have that high altitude capability. The Yak-1M has a 500 meter disadvantage as compared to the Airacobra. So the Yak-1M is very, very much a low altitude fighter. Rate of climb, both the BF-109F and the Yak-1M have an advantage over the Airacobra. A lot of planes at the Tier 6 level. But hey, I am going to go through every one of them with you. Okay, next up we have the Bell P-39Q-15 Airacobra. This aircraft is currently, I believe, in the premium shop. So we'll take a look and see how these two Airacobras compare to each other. Should be interesting. We also have the Jovakin LA5 to take a look at. The American Airacobra is indicated as being superior in terms of armaments over the Russian Airacobra and also the LA5. So let's take a look at that. So looking here at the Russian Airacobra, it has one 37mm cannon, which it's basically the same cannon as the 37mm in the Airacobra. So no advantage there on the part of either aircraft. However, where the American Airacobra takes the advantage over the Russian Airacobra, the Russian aircraft only has two 12.7mm machine guns, which do the same damage as the two 12.7mm machine guns on the American Airacobra. What they are missing are the extra four 7.62mm machine guns that the American Airacobra has. So certainly in terms of armaments, you would want to choose the American Airacobra over the Russian Airacobra. Looking at the LA5, we see it has three 20mm cannons, which do 95 damage per second. So they collectively, they certainly outdamage the single 37mm cannon on the Airacobra, but they have it has no machine guns. So that's where the LA5 takes the disadvantage. In terms of hit points, both the Russian Airacobra and the LA5 have a slight advantage in terms of hit points over the American Airacobra, but if you're choosing between the Russian one and the American one, they're basically the same. There's only a 10-point difference between the two, which is really nothing. Top speed at best altitude, the Russian Airacobra has a slight 5 km per hour advantage over the American Airacobra. Again, really isn't going to make a difference in a straight up fight. The LA5 also has a slight advantage in that department over the American Airacobra. Maximum dive speed for the Russian and the American Airacobra the same. The LA5 is slightly inferior by 70 kilometers per hour. Average time to turn 360 degrees is the same for all three of these aircraft. Rate of roll, the Russian Airacobra and the LA5 have an advantage over the American Airacobra in that aspect. Optimum airspeed for both Airacobra is the same. The LA5 slight advantage of 50 kilometers per hour. Stall speed for both the Airacobra is the same. The American Airacobra will stall prior to the LA5, however. Optimum altitude the same for both Airacobras, whereas the LA5 has a 300 meter disadvantage as compared to the Airacobras. Rate of climb the same for both Airacobras. the LA-5 has a slight advantage in that category. So for me, if I were choosing between these two Airacobras, I would go with the American Airacobra for overall performance and better armaments. Okay, it's been a long road, but the last aircraft that we have here to compare is the Mikoyan Gurevich I-210, which is indicated as having significantly inferior armaments as compared to the Airacobra. Take a look here and see why that is. And we see right off the bat that it only has two 20mm cannons, which collectively do 160 damage per second. So they do not even measure up to the damage per second of the single 37mm cannon on the Airacobra. So that's pretty obvious advantage that the Airacobra has. In terms of hit points, the I-210 does have a slight and what I would call insignificant advantage over the Airacobra. Airspeed, the I-210 does have a 50 km/h advantage over the Airacobra, so that is not insignificant. The I-210 also has a 20 km/h advantage on the dive. However, in terms of average time to turn 360 degrees, the Airacobra has a 0.7 second advantage over the I-210. Rate of roll, better for the Airacobra than the I-210. Optimum airspeed, again, the I-210 just seems to be a faster plane, but not by a huge margin, 18 km/h. Stall speed, the I-210 definitely has the advantage over the Airacobra, but that's been pretty much true for every aircraft we have compared to the Airacobra. Optimum altitude, this of course is where the I-210 has the advantage by 400 meters. I-210 also better rate of climb, 8.7 meters per second. I think overall, if I had to choose though between these two aircraft, I would definitely choose the American Airacobra over the I-210. Okay folks, so I hope that has helped put the Airacobra into context with its Tier 6 peers. So having gone over my build for this aircraft, having reviewed its specifications and compared the P-39N-1 to its Tier 6 peers, let's head into a battle now and see how it actually performs. Alright, so we have drawn the Plateau Turning Point Theater of Operation, and we will be headed over to the command center first.
Attention, you are entering the zone controlled by the enemy.
It is always important to secure the command center to get bomber flights inbound to enemy controlled sectors. And once we've secured the command center, we'll move on to the air base. That is a Heel air base, and of course you can also respawn into different aircraft if you so choose. Of course, we're not going to do that because I want you to see this aircraft in action. So as you can see, we've got a 6-second boost, and I'll work that down to 3 seconds, but not beyond that, because I do want to have some boost available once we get to our target. You can see just how maneuverable this aircraft is. And the guns are excellent. You do have to manage, of course, the overheating. That's one thing about them, but when they connect, they really connect. Now I'm using extend flaps and air brakes to tighten the turning circle. You can see we're not having any difficulties at all maneuvering. Let's see if we can work on a ground target here and flip this sector. Maybe if we can take out some low-hanging fruit here. Get these ground targets set on fire, and they should burn out, hopefully. Either that or we'll have new defense aircraft spawn. Jeez. Alright, there we go. We have some aircraft respawning here that we can take on. There we go. And we got a multi-roll coming in here, and he's going to probably take us on head-on, so we're just going to move to the right, let him pass. And we definitely have the maneuverability advantage over this aircraft. So it should be pretty easy to get the better of this fight quickly. We do have another fighter coming in though, so we'll have to be cognizant of that. And we'll just maneuver here. Looks like our pilot is injured. And we've got some serious company, you know. Fortunately. Well, at least we turned the sector. Maybe we can get back over there and keep them from taking it back. We are outnumbered over here, but we'll see what we can do. We'll start with the fighters up top. And our cannons were overheated there, but I knew that we still had machine guns that we could continue to fire. And we need to take out this ground attack aircraft. It's almost dead anyway. So it should be an easy kill if the defense aircraft don't get it first. There we go. Alright, so well, they really want our command center, I guess. We've got a low health fighter over here, Kai 61, so we'll address it first. And I do think we have the maneuverability to take this fighter on. We certainly have the firepower, and it's already low health, so I don't think we'll have too much of an issue if we can catch up to it here. A little bit out of our range here. There we go. we're getting a little closer now. And multi-roll coming in. Again, should be pretty easy to deal with that.
Be advised, a line of thunderstorms is approaching. We'll soon be unable to provide support. Do you copy? Over.
And looks like they're back over at our command center. What do we have over there? We have a ground attack aircraft, and all we have are air defense aircraft, so I think it's going to be up to us to deal with it. And if we don't get there quickly, we're definitely going to have some problems.
There's a heavy storm here. Unable to proceed.
There we
Return
go.
to base. Do you copy?
Okay. What do we have up here? We have a human yak. Ooh. We're a bit outnumbered there. And that yak is going to probably be more maneuverable than we are. We've also arrived at the squall line, so right now they're dealing with the bombers, which is one of the advantages of the bombers. So I think what we'll do is move over here to this garrison and see if we can't take it. Deal with this BF-109 first.
The airfields are ours. We've got the enemy contained.
There we go. And we have that Kai 61 coming in again. And then a bomber up there. I don't know if we're going to be able to get to it, but we'll give it a try. It's pretty low health, so if we could take it out, that would be fantastic, but yeah. No, we're just not going to be able to do it. Unless, of course, it comes to us. Yeah. It's very nice of it. Goodbye, Mr. Bomber. And we've got this multi-roll down here. So we'll head down and take care of it. Alright.
Victory is in sight.
Looks like our command center is still doing okay. We'll just have to keep an eye on it. I wonder if we can do something with their command center. Yeah. By the time we get over there.
The enemy is almost defeated.
We do have some bombers coming in, so we'll deal with it and maybe take out this Kai 61 on the way if it's not already dead by the time we get there. Alright, and bombers?
I'm proud of you,
Oh,
pilot.
not necessary.
Head back home.
Okay, very good. So that went quite well. Let's see what we did here. Flying start. Effective fire. Subjugator. Kozhedub medal. Boy, that's a tough one to pronounce. Let's see here. Killing 5 aircraft from the enemy combat group after the squall line. Got the #1 rank on the team. We'll head back now and take a look at the after action report and get the full picture. Okay, so we were destroyed one time. We were in combat for over 11.5 minutes. Did 1900 in damage to aerial targets. Did some ground damage, although it wasn't very effective. Well, we gave it the old college try, though. Did take out 14 aerial targets, 5 of which were done while defending. And let's see here. Over 8,300 in combat points. Let's see, our opposite #1 was the Kai 61, which I think we shot it down a couple times with 7 kills. That was a bot. All right, so good result there. I think that really showed you the capabilities of this aircraft. Very strong cannons. You do have to carefully manage the overheating. Very maneuverable. All around an excellent aircraft. Does, of course, suffer trying to get up there and take out high altitude targets, but we did take out 1 bomber. Anyway, I hope that you have really enjoyed this video. This is an excellent premium aircraft, and I think that if you get an opportunity to fly it, that you'll have great success in it.